of this legislation?
I'm going to take Jacinda Ardern.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's my absolute pleasure to be able to clarify some of the friendly banter that's been happening between this side of the House and my colleagues, in particular from the Select Committee process. I want to point out, Mr. Chair, that some of the frustration on this side of the House comes from the assumption that I've heard made by members that somehow this bill embodies the investment approach that the Minister espouses when it comes to welfare reform. And the simple point that we wish to raise is that if you are on government support and are older than the age of 19, the only thing this bill does for you is introduce more work testing. Let's be clear. We have not ignored, Mr. Chair, that this bill does change youth services, that it puts in additional child support for teen parents, that it's got incentive payments attached for those on a youth payment card and a teen parent card. But those are all measures that will only affect those who are under the age of 19 years. So for the 112,000 on the DPB, over 90,000 of which are sole parents, for the almost 50,000 on an unemployment benefit, for the tens of thousands on an invalid's or sickness benefit, this bill either does absolutely nothing or it introduces increased work testing. So let us be clear. We are not talking about rhetoric on this side of the House. We are debating the bill that the government has put in front of us. And I think it is absolutely legitimate to question the rhetoric around an investment approach when this bill affects the roughly 3,000 young people who are currently drawing down on government support. I accept that there's another 11 that you'll put services in for, but that is who you are targeting. Now, I also don't question that that's purposely being done by the government because of the statistics around trying to detract young people from staying on a benefit in the longer term. And there we just dispute whether or not this is the most effective way to do it, and that's a legitimate argument to have. But please do not test this side of the House with rhetoric around investment for the majority of people on a benefit when this is not what this bill does. And now that we have clarified that point, I'm happy to come back to part one of this bill and continue with the discussion. I want to first, though, come back to what the Minister raised around her goal of ensuring that young people are in education. Now, again, we do not dispute the importance of education as a foundation for our young people and securing their future. Our concern is that by narrowing the incentives around a goal that may be quite a distance from where a young person's starting point is, we may create a disincentive for a youth provider to work with that young person. Now, our argument, Minister, has been that the existing youth service framework gave more discretion to youth providers than this framework does. Now, if the Minister can prove to me that that is not the case, that the way that the contracts were structured before did not constrain in the way that you are purporting they were constrained, I would be very interested to hear that, because that is not what youth providers are telling members in this House. We've heard a very different story than what the Minister is purporting. So we are not saying let's not have these services. We are trying to aim for some of the same goals that the government is, but we believe that the government's spending more working with fewer young people and potentially getting a worse result. And I think that's a very legitimate point to make. Mr. Chair, I want to come back to the youth support payment. We haven't discussed that yet, in particular the fundamental change around the way that particularly young people who are currently on an independent youth benefit or who are currently on a domestic purposes benefit, who now, if they're under 19, will transition to a teen parent payment system. We heard from the government that their purpose for moving to this youth support payment, which would be underpinned by a card system and would affect roughly 1,000 independent youth benefit kids, roughly 1,500 teen parents, was to try and encourage greater financial management by these young people. And the way the government wanted to do that was move them onto a card system. which essentially means that they automatically have some of their bills paid out, and then they get a small discretionary amount on a card, Mr Chair. Mr. Chair.
Dr. Rajan Prasad.
Thank you, Mr Chair.